Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dattitude, Friday edition, episode number 156. Here, as I am Jim Derry, here in Louisiana, Zach Ewing is live from Omaha, Nebraska, site of one of the greatest college baseball games in history last night. We're going to get into all those things. In fact, I think you pretty much know what we're going to talk about today. It's LSU 2, Wake Forest nothing. Tommy Tanks with the bomb. The championship round is set. LSU versus Florida. The best of three begins on Saturday. Zach, have you recovered? Did you get some sleep?
I did. I actually was up early this morning, and you said I'm in Omaha. I'm in Iowa, and I went for a jog.
I'm sorry. That's correct.
I'm at the Caesars Council Bluffs, and the pedestrian bridge over the Missouri River is just like half a mile away. So I went for a jog up into Nebraska. Like, I can tell my wife that I jogged into another state and sound really active, and it was only like a half a mile jog. And so, yeah, it's man, a game like that just energizes you. Like, listen, I've been here a week. I'm ready to go home. But after last night, you're like, let me get back out to the park and see another one.
I mean, it's crazy. We're going to get into some of the questions of whether this is the greatest game in LSU history. I mean, you could argue there were arguments on Twitter last night whether it was the greatest College World Series game ever in history. And in case you live under a rock and you didn't get to see the ending or you have missed the highlights, I don't have the actual game clip, but what I do have for you is Chris Blair's call, because I actually thought, I mean, I'm not going to diss on ESPN, but I actually thought the call on national television was a little lackluster. So we went and found the call from Chris Blair, and here it is, the final 50 seconds or so of what I think is the greatest game in College World Series history. Let's listen to it.
Camden Manassi is ready to go. The right-hander facing the right-handed hitting Tommy White. Manassi leans in now, comes set. Rocks and fires. Tommy White lifts it high and deep to left field. Get out of here, Bob. Costello to the wall. It's out of here. Walking off. Tommy White. Home run number 23. And LSU is moving on. Wake Forest is headed home. Tommy White down the third base line gets showered and mobbed at home plate. 2-0. LSU here in the bottom of the 11th inning.
You know, it's interesting because I am an old school kind of guy that doesn't like a whole lot of change in the grand scheme of things. Let's just face it. I mean, I'm not necessarily the get off my lawn guy. Okay, I'm in between that, I guess. But so where I'm going with this is, I was a huge Jim Hawthorne fan. I thought, and I'm a play-by-play guy myself. So some of the things that I do in my own calls, I try to model after some of my favorites. And so when Chris Blair came in, I'm like, who is this guy? He's from Kentucky. He doesn't really fit in. Where did they get this guy? You know, I completely changed my opinion on Chris Blair, who has been on the show. And I'm not just saying that because he's been on the show. He has completely grown on me now. He is the voice of the Tigers as an LSU guy, born with purple and gold in my blood. Chris Blair is phenomenal, and I thought the call was great. And I wish I would have been listening to the radio instead of TV.
Yeah, people don't realize, because you've got more than I do, but I've got some play-by-play experience as well. People don't realize how hard it is to call a big moment like that.
It really is.
You don't get to rehearse, right? You have to, maybe in your mind you've called big home runs in your imagination like we all did in the backyard as a kid, but given this specific circumstances, given the fact that you don't know it's happening until it happens, it's hard to kind of call on that. And what I really thought added to it, where Bill Franquez in the background, kind of screaming and yelling, "It's gone!" And you can just feel the excitement.
If you watch it, Zach, they show the booth, and he had to turn off Franquez's mic because Franquez went insane. And so he literally, you could see Chris Blair, as even while he's getting excited and pumping up his fist, he's turning off Franquez's mic because he's like banging on the table and doing all kinds of crazy things. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah,
And I encourage everyone out there to go find it. You can find it on YouTube and Twitter, watching them go nuts when it happens.
And where I'm old school is like, I don't necessarily like announcers to go crazy, even if it's for a hometown team. Like, I understand you're going to,
Yeah, you wouldn't want to listen to me.
That's a radio thing, like you get your own home team's announcers, but I don't like it when it's overboard because, like, tell me what happened, right?
Yeah.
But that one worked. And number one, this is such a big moment that you can excuse it anyway, right? Like, this just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
If ever. LSU's been a very fortunate fan base that they've had moments like this.
Agreed.
In different sports, but most fan bases like that just doesn't happen. So you can excuse it. But also it works because Chris keeps his cool to a certain extent where, yeah, he's excited, but he's telling you, I always think it's funny. And you mentioned the ESPN broadcast, which number one, how in the hell do you not switch Ben McDonald onto that game?
I have no idea.
Even before the game, like, forget.
I guess you don't want homerism. I don't know.
I mean, it must have been a schedule.
Or maybe Ben said he didn't want to do an LSU game, and that
on Twitter he did. He said on Twitter he would have liked to do it, but it was out of his control. And like I guess it's a hierarchy thing. I don't know. People have been bagging on Eduardo Perez, I think, really unfairly.
Oh, I thought he did okay.
Yeah, I don't think he's been that bad, but I think LSU fans just want Ben McDonald. But for the game in which Paul Skenes was going to break his all-time strikeout record, why not have him in the booth?
Oh, at least have a cutaway to and have him in. They had Roger Clemens in for an inning. Why couldn't you have, even as just a guy, right?
Yeah,
you could have him in for.
That
didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Well, ESPN does a lot of things that I don't think make sense. So, if they didn't have all these major events, right? I can't even hardly watch their talk stuff anymore. It's changed. So it's just a different world. But anyway, but I don't know. I thought it was lacking a little bit. I thought their coverage was lacking a little bit. And I don't say that very often. I think for the most part, they do a good job with games, but man, this game itself, and I want to get into the whole, is this the greatest game? I have LSU history on the scroll, but maybe College World Series history. There was this debate on Twitter last night, and I know an argument, and I never asked you, so my guess is you're going to say Warren Morris is better because it meant a championship. That is my guess of what you're going to say. So let me get your take first, and then I'm going to give you mine and why I think it's the best.
All right. Well, first of all, I was only 11 years old when Warren Morris happened. I was living in New Mexico. I do believe I watched the game, but I didn't have a rooting interest in it. I thought it was a cool moment. So it certainly doesn't mean anything to me emotionally like it does for a lot of LSU fans. I think Warren Morris was a more dramatic ending for a couple of reasons. Number one, like you said, it was a championship game. Number two, there were 2 outs and LSU was behind. They were behind by a run.
That's true.
Runner on third with 2 outs, and he had a 2-run homer. And then on top of all that, Warren Morris had like 3 home runs the entire season. He was not a home run hitter. And so
he had none. That was his first home run of the year.
Okay,
but he was injured for a lot of the year too.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere. And so as far as the ending goes, it's pretty freaking hard to top that, and it always will be. Tommy White hitting a no doubt blast, like, it took your breath away, but you knew. The other thing about Warren Morris was it barely snuck over the wall and it barely stayed fair. Like where Tommy White, that ball left the bat, I said it's gone before it left the infield. You could just tell, even with the wind blowing in, it had a different feel off the bat than all these close calls. The one TCU where that kid launched that ball on Wednesday that would have tied the game against Florida, and it died on the warning track, and the wind's been blowing in. A lot of balls have been dying. You knew that one wasn't going to die. There was no doubt. And there's nobody out. And so even if it doesn't go out, and even if they don't score, they're going to keep playing. So for a lot of reasons, I think Warren Morris was a more dramatic ending. Now, as far as the game itself, if you start to include the Skenes versus Rhett Lauder factor, and the fact that it lived up to all that hype, where ESPN is talking about 2 aces, and Baseball America is saying, is this the greatest pitching matchup in College World Series history? And so you get this hype, and a lot of times, as sports fans know, games don't actually live up to that. Or you're sitting there in the fourth inning and it's 5-4, and you're going, well, what happened to the greatest pitching matchup in World Series history?
Right.
This one, I mean, these guys were cruising. There was like 3 guys who even reached second base while they were in the game. And it just had a feel from the very beginning. I turned to Wilson Alexander, one of our LSU beat writers up here, in like the second inning, and said, this has a feel of a game that's going to be 0-0 in the 7th or 8th inning. And one run, and one run might win it. And he said, yeah, it does. And then part of it, Jim, was like, it went by so fast. I mean, this game was in the 7th inning after an hour and a half. And
yeah, I was joking about that. That's true.
Yeah, like part of that, it almost made the drama increase, because you looked up and you're like, oh my God, like this one run is going to win this game.
Yeah, I said that in the 6th inning. I think in the 6th inning, I'm like, if someone scores, they're going to win.
And so you had this from like the 6th, 7th inning on, after just an hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes, you had this sense that every pitch was crucial, because one home run could win the game. If a guy got on base, that was it. Like you had to manage around that guy on base, like the game depended on it, like your season depended on it, because it did.
Jim Derry here with Zach Ewing on this Friday Dattitude. If you have any comments, if you want to give your opinion on whether it's the greatest game in LSU history or College World Series history, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and type your comment. It'll show up there, and I will show it on the screen. And or if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. If you're on Twitter, you can just say hello, because the comments don't come over from there. But we're going to have interviews from last night from Jay Johnson, Tommy Tanks, and Paul Skenes on the show while we're here. So that's coming up very shortly as well. My opinion is this. You can argue, I think, whether it was the greatest moment, as you say, kind of. I mean, I think that's what you're talking about. You can argue whether Warren Morris was a better moment than Tommy Tanks hitting the home run. But as far as the overall game, I'm not saying most important game or biggest game, because I changed biggest to greatest when I was typing. I hate the word biggest. Sounds like you're kind of in 6th grade and you don't know what to write anyway. But I think as far as greatest game goes, unless you're just a casual Joe Blow fan who this is the first LSU game you watched all year and you haven't watched much baseball in general, and you watch maybe 3 games in general and only 1 or 2 in full, I don't know how anyone could say that this isn't a better game than the Warren Morris game. Because my point on Twitter was, in 27 years from now, assuming I have all my faculties, because I'm going to be really old 27 years from now, but assuming I can remember things 27 years from now, I'm going to remember Paul Skenes. I'm going to remember Rhett Lauder. I'm going to remember Trey Morgan's we haven't even got to that yet. The incredible play that Trey Morgan made, one of the best defensive plays that I've seen on that stage, really at any level, to make that play. And so these are all things I'm going to remember, not just Tommy Tanks' home run. And all I remember about the game in 96, and I was 28 years old, so it's not like I was a little kid like you were, Zach. I was 20 years old. I remember watching it. I remember where I was when I was watching it. But I designed the front page for the Time Speaking in Sports section. It's hanging on my wall. I had to go to work right when it was over. And what I remember from it, Warren Morris. I don't remember hardly anything else. I really don't. And, I remember Cora laying flat out at shortstop. I remember more about Miami than I do about LSU. And so when this game comes 27 years from now, I'm going to remember a lot more than that. And I think, to me, that's why this is the greatest game. Maybe not the greatest moment, but the greatest game in College World Series history.
I don't think that there's probably a wrong answer here.
I agree with that.
We've got some recency bias. Like I was looking back, because again, I was 11 years old. I don't remember a whole lot about the Warren Morris game other than the ending. LSU was down 7-3 in that game.
Yeah.
They came back with 2 runs in the 7th, 2 more in the 8th, and tied it. And then Miami took the lead in the top of the 9th, 8-7. And then Morris hits his dramatic 2-out homer in the bottom of the 9th. And so there was more back and forth in that game. There was more of the comeback feel.
And Sean McDonough's call, by the way, was fantastic.
Yeah. And like I said before, just the pure shock value of this guy hitting his first home run of the year to win the College World Series I think you could argue that game. So I don't know that there's a wrong answer, but this game was probably, I'm just going to guess, was better played than that game. And
Larry,
I say that.
Go ahead. I was going to say Larry Arduin says the 96 game was better. College World Series championship final with an improbable home run. That doesn't make the game better though. I understand, Larry. I understand what you're saying. I just don't think it makes the game better. Bookie Brown says, how about them cardiac cats LSU bet 2-game series? Let's see. 7 best
2-game series ever. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Best pitching, best hitters are on LSU. He says they win it all. We're going to get to our predictions a little bit, Bookie. We still have plenty to talk about here, including some interviews from, again, Jay Johnson, Tommy Tanks, Paul Skenes. We have that coming up very shortly. Just talking about the greatest game. Go ahead, Zach.
To wrap up that discussion, the only thing that I'll say is the Rosenblatt factor changes it, because Rosenblatt was a hitter's park, and so
yeah, that's true.
Was ever safe in that park. This is very different here, and so there are two different kinds of games. But I don't think you can say that it doesn't matter that it was the championship final, because the stage does matter. Because
I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Yeah,
like I once saw a college baseball game when I went to college at Missouri, and I covered the baseball team for 2 years, and they came up. They were in the Big 12 still at that time, and they came up to play Nebraska one year when Nebraska was very good. And so I drove up to Lincoln to cover the series, and Max Scherzer was Missouri's Friday night starter, and Joba Chamberlain, who you remember from the Yankees, was Nebraska's Friday night starter. And it was hyped up, certainly not like this, but it was a very similar game where both guys got into double-digit Ks, and Missouri ended up winning 2-0. Obviously it wasn't a walk-off. Missouri was the road team, but I think they scored in the 8th or 9th inning. Great game, but you can't compare it to this because of the stage. And so the stage does matter. I will say that.
And it was still, in the grand scheme of things, I know it wasn't the championship game, but in a sort, it was a championship game. The championship game of that bracket, it's, I don't know. They're all, it's the way you look at something, right? It's your own perspective. There's no definitive. It's like saying so-and-so is the best player of all time. You can argue almost any sport anywhere who the greatest player of all time is. We do it all the time. So I don't know that there's any right or wrong answer. Let's hear from Tommy Tanks. Talk about the home run. I thought it was one of the most hilarious post-game player interviews. I'm not talking about necessarily the one I'm going to show, because he's had time to calm down and relax and sit down and gather his thoughts. But immediately on ESPN, he was completely out of breath, didn't know what to say, and had everybody cracking up when he said, what was he looking for? And he said fastball, but I didn't get a fastball. And I just kind of goes to show things. He talks about that a little bit here. Let's hear from Tommy Tanks White here on Dattitude.
I'm always confident in the box. That's just how I play the game. I don't think I was struggling, but I thought I was doing all right.
You're not.
But I was super confident. Just doing my deal. That's about it. Yeah, so I was definitely going for heater. I thought a heater was coming, but I was very amped up, and I saw a slider that was up, and I could get my bat head to it, so that was about it.
Tommy, after the celebration, you went and embraced, I think, Camden Manassi. I know you guys were close. Why was that important for you to do, and a number of your teammates started doing that with Wake players? Why was that important tonight?
Their season's over. It's a very hard time. They had high expectations coming into this, and they played great. But I've known Camden and Bennett Lee for quite some time now. We're all from Tampa, and he's I played with him, against him, growing up my whole life, and he's one of my close friends. So I didn't want him to feel anything. I just wanted to make sure he was all right.
Now, I didn't know they knew each other until after the game was over when we read, but I just thought that was an incredible moment that you don't really see all that much in baseball. You see it in hockey after a series final is over. I don't know. I think that's the only sport you really see. You'll see football players mingling around, but after any game, really. But that was a special moment, I thought, when he went out and hugged Manassi, and after what he had said, they're impossible to be beat. Well, I just thought it was a great moment, and I thought there was a lot of sportsmanship, and these two teams recognize and respect one another, I think.
I agree with you, and I will say this about Cameron Manasseh, and I know everybody's throwing that clip around, and Jordy Culotta, Mikey Matuk, who are buddies of ours, but they're like the pride comes before the fall, and pouring it on this guy. Like, look, I was in that press conference Monday night when Cameron Manasseh said that, and people are not getting the context of that, and I know it's not going to be popular for me to get on and defend a Wake Forest player, but the question he was asked was about the camaraderie of the team. And he was talking about how close the Wake Forest team was and how that made them feel like they were impossible to beat. He was not sitting there and bragging and saying that no one would ever beat them, which is and he's a college kid and it came out wrong. And like, I get to the victor go the spoils and everything, but it really kind of bugs me. I've had 10 people on my Facebook page share that clip with me. And it's like, lay off Cameron Manasseh. That's not what he meant to say.
Well, and then there's people who haven't been paying enough attention and just see that clip out of the sky, right? And they don't know the context of it or whatever.
And
so
that's the problem with sharing it. When you share it and say, "Oh, ha ha ha, take that, Manasseh, take that, Wake Forest," but the kid wasn't trying to sit up there and say no one's going to be able to beat. I mean, they just played on Monday night's game was incredibly close between LSU and Wake Forest too. Like, there's no way he's going to sit up there and say no one can beat us. He was talking about the bond he felt with his teammates, and how that made them feel like they were.
You also have to give it to him for staying out there that long to actually go. And as much for him, because he could have just walked right off the field. I mean, you got to realize how long that was. He was on the field to wait to give Tommy Tank some love, because again, I mean, that's well over a minute, okay, that he stood out there instead of hanging his head, walking to the dugout and getting off the field, or walking in his team's corner, and they do their post-game thing in baseball. They sit on the field for 10 minutes or whatever the hell they do. But he could have easily walked away, and he went and made sure he came up and congratulated. So I just thought that was a great moment of sportsmanship. I'm glad he was asked about it. I'm glad I found out that they knew each other. It doesn't change my opinion on how great is sportsmanship. I think he would have done it had Dylan Cruz hit the home run.
The other good bit of sportsmanship, and since I just tore into LSU fans a little bit for that Manasseh video and sharing it so much, I'll also say this. Another cool clip, if you can go look and find it, was Wake Forest and LSU were in the same hotel. People don't realize that, but they were both in the Hilton. And when Wake Forest returned to the hotel, there were LSU fans lined up there waiting to greet the LSU players, and they all stood and gave the Wake team an applause. And
so that was awesome.
They came back into the hotel. So that was a cool moment. And it's one of the really cool things about Omaha is that everybody kind of embraces everybody else. And yes, you're competitive and you want to win, but there's also this feeling of like, hey, we're all here, and it's a celebration of college baseball as well.
I think that, one of the things we've talked mostly good about Jay Johnson, there were a couple plays throughout this World Series so far that I've questioned, but I guess if you go through a series that is this long, you're going to I mean, I think even a manager or a coach would have some things that he looks back on and say, yeah, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Like even if he's just talking among his friends and not to the media or whatever. So that being said, I think Jay Johnson overall has done just an incredible job his first time on this stage. And you can just kind of feel that this isn't going to be the last. One of the moments that I thought was great in this press conference last night, and it's in this Jay Johnson clips, there are three different questions two different questions he answers in this clip coming up. And then there's also his opening statement. And the way he finishes his opening statement talking about the transfer portal and he's being a salesman, I think was just unique. I don't know that I've seen a coach do it this way.
He's done it before.
Well,
I've seen him do it before, but yeah,
I haven't seen this, and I think it's phenomenal. And again, just watching this 58 seconds of clip makes me feel like LSU is going to be around for a while. Let's take a listen.
It's one of the greatest moments of my life, honestly. Number one. Number two, couldn't be more proud of our team. I think that exemplifies the talent on this roster, but more importantly, the character and the people. And as I look to my left, I just see three great players that are better people than they are players. The best pitched college baseball game I have ever seen from both sides. Obviously, what Paul did was spectacular. What Thatcher did was spectacular. You might see four pitchers that were on that mound tonight from both teams that will pitch in Major League Baseball All-Star games. And lastly, look to my left. If you're one of the best players in the transfer portal, there's only one place to come play, because last summer I spent a lot of time with these young men, and I think they would tell you they made the right choice. So I'd want to join forces with them if they're out there.
I thought I had another question in there, but I guess I cut that part out. I was trying to keep them as short as possible. But, we can debate about greatest game or whatever. I don't think anyone can debate that this is the greatest college baseball game as far as pitching goes that I've ever seen. And you mentioned it earlier. You said, games are hyped up and whatever, and they always blah, blah, blah. They pump these things up as much. This thing was beyond the hype. I thought, and not just the Skenes louder factor, I thought overall it was the best pitched college baseball game, period, that I've ever. And I know there was a 14-inning game that Arkansas and I think South Carolina played back in whenever. I don't care about all that. These two cats were dominating, and they are going to be dominating in the major leagues. I think both of them. Now, Lauder maybe not as dominating in the major leagues. We'll see where he goes, but I think he's going to be a pitcher for a long time. Just incredible pitching of the baseball.
Yeah, it was. And I think people tend to forget when they're watching college baseball that these guys don't go straight to the majors. They do need a little bit more seasoning. Frankly, let's say the Pirates or Nationals draft Paul Skenes, because he's almost certainly going to go in the top 2 picks. He probably will not pitch again this year. First of all, they're going to shut him down.
Yeah.
He's already thrown more than 100 innings. He may go to the Arizona Fall League and throw 10 or 20 innings there, and then they'll ramp him up again next spring, and then he'll spend at least a whole season in the minors, and it'll be 2025 before we would see him in the majors at the earliest. So let's I do understand hey, he's going to be great, and like I said, I saw Max Scherzer pitch in college, and you had the same feeling about him, and these guys are going to be good, but Scherzer's a good example. It took him several years of being a minor leaguer, and then even his first couple years in the majors with Arizona, he was not dominating. So yeah, it's no sure thing, but like I said earlier, the hype for the game compared to what we got was just so satisfying. It was so great.
I agree completely. And Paul Skenes said, it was he's got this. The reason why I think he's going to be successful, besides the fact that he has this arm that can go into the 8th inning and still throw 100 miles an hour, which is insane. He's going to have to develop another pitch to be a stud, I think, in the major leagues, which he will. But you just listen to him. He's got this air about him. And I know a lot of players do, but he's got that thing, that inner confidence. A lot of players talk the talk and walk the walk, but he's got this thing about him that there's more than that to it. Let's hear what he had to say. There's also a question from our own Leah Van in there, but there was no debate. And again, when we get back after this clip, I want to talk about whether he could possibly pitch a potential game 3 in the championship series, because there was debate last night. Not debate. They were saying on ESPN this was the last game he ever pitched. I think just the opposite. There is no way he's not going to pitch again in some form or fashion, is my opinion. But let's hear what he has to say, because he gives a little behind-the-scenes look.
Leah Van, Baton Rouge Advocate. Paul, you come in on probably your shortest amount of rest you've had all season, and I'm just wondering, what did the conversation about starting today look like? Was there ever any doubt? And just how did you feel about coming out for a second appearance at the College World Series?
There was no doubt. I know, our strength coach is Wes. I knew everyone was going to do everything in their power to get me ready. Everyone's going to get everyone else on the staff ready to pitch, 2 or 3 more times for the bullpen arms. But there was no doubt in my mind. And to be honest, there wasn't a whole lot of conversation. To be honest, I think it might have been cooler for the people in the stands than it was for me, just because all it comes down to is just executing. I didn't watch a whole lot of Louder's outing. Obviously, he did really well, executed really well, but just comes down to slowing the game down and going out there and executing. Yeah, the whole year we knew we could do it, and that was the primary goal when we had a meeting like January 14th or something like that, and the goal, for this season was to win a national championship, and everything along the way would be a bonus. This was, what we've had our eyes on all year. And it's really cool to be here now.
That is one confident, cocky dude.
Well, he's just even keel. Like he's going to go out. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to do my thing. Nobody's going to hit me, and I'm going to come back into the dugout.
I didn't watch Louder. I don't give a damn what Louder was doing. I knew they weren't scoring on me. He might as well have said that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I've actually seen this from a couple of guys. Riley Cooper was doing this the other night. It's not as hot in Omaha as it is in Baton Rouge, but it is hot. And they'll go back into the clubhouse. Very easy to get back there in the air conditioning for a couple of minutes too. So I think that may be part of that. But yeah, look, he is phenomenal as far as whether he pitches again. And maybe this is a good way to transition into the championship series. There is a possibility that was his last appearance. If LSU wins tomorrow and wins Sunday, they don't need him. So that would be one scenario in which that happens. I also don't think they would bring him back before Monday. So even if they were to lose, like even if you're facing elimination on Sunday, at some point you do have to look out for this guy's future. And look, he pitched very well last night, but he's now thrown 243 pitches in 6 days after not having more than one start in 7 days all year. And his velocity was down a little bit. Like on Saturday against Tennessee, he was throwing 101, 102. Against Wake Forest last night, he was throwing 99. So that's not a big difference, but I don't know that if I'm LSU, I want to push it and bring him out in 2 days for 50 more pitches or whatever it is, just for his sake.
There is a game 3. There is a 0.1% chance that he doesn't start that game. I don't care. You don't need to give me any stats, numbers, pitches. I get what you're talking about. And I get that we live in a different world than we lived in even 10 years ago. But unless he just says no, which he's not going to, I don't see how you don't put him out there. I'm not saying you go 8 innings because I don't think you do that. I don't think that he'd be able to be honest. I think that he'd probably start fading around the 5th. But you milk whatever you can milk out of Paul Skenes. And just listening to that clip alone tells me that there's no way that he wouldn't let them not put him out there. I mean, obviously, if you're Jay Johnson, it's like your dad, right? You can say no if you want to, but he's not gonna.
Yeah, I think Monday would be the day. That's 3 days rest. It's not full rest, but again, if you're not talking about a full outing, and you said 0.1% chance he doesn't start, I could see a scenario where, let's say Thatcher Hurd hasn't been used. Maybe Hurd starts, gets you 3-4 innings, and then depending on how the game is going, Paul Skenes is your fireman, and you bring him in a close game in the 5th inning and have him come, just blow people out and say, okay, we're going to go 100% intensity, which you usually don't do in a start, and get us 2 innings here, whatever the case might be. I think if it got to Monday, he would pitch almost certainly, unless LSU was up 10-0 in the 5th inning and they didn't need him. Just
don't think you take a pitcher like that and not start him. I get, if we'll only use him if we need him, but I think that kind of guy's gonna be more effective in a starting role. I think back to being, had there not been a day off and it started today, and then so game 3 would technically be Sunday, then it's different. Then you can't start him. And then he's available for 15, 20 pitches. I think back to game 7 of the 16 World Series, the real World Series, the Major League World Series, not the College World Series. Being a Cubs fan, I remember all those games. And John Lester came in late in the game, but he was coming off of just 2 days rest. And he pitched, I think he made like 30, 40 pitches. So I could see a scenario where, so you'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, you're talking about 3 days rest. I mean, I think that you could probably make 60, 70 pitches, maybe even 80, just kind of depending. But he's going to lose. He might not lose velocity, but he's going to lose effectiveness as he goes along. So you're going to know. But I just don't think you don't put him out there in a starting role. Again, we're jumping the gun because there might not be a game 3. If either team wins the first 2 games, there is no game 3. So I don't think you're going to see him either in game 1 or game 2, unless there's some really strange, super strange scenario, which is possible. But even then, I wouldn't count on it.
No, I don't think you do that if you're LSU. And it's funny because while we've been on the air, the odds have come out. The odds have been out for the series, and it's basically even. Florida is minus 120, LSU's even money, and it's actually moved now. Florida's minus 115, LSU's minus 105. So there's been some money coming in on LSU. But while we've been on the air, the game one line has come out for tomorrow night. And Florida is favored, again, not by a lot, minus 130, and LSU's even money over at Caesar Sportsbook. And so that tells me that the odds makers too think, okay, we like Florida in game one, but the longer this series goes on, that scale tilts toward LSU because they've got this guy who wears number 20 waiting to pitch on Monday if it gets that far.
Well, we've come to that point in the show where we I think we kind of do talk, give our predictions on the upcoming series with Florida, because I kind of wanted to hold this to 40 minutes or less. We're going to go past that most probably. And I think everybody for watching and listening, we've been on, this is the third Dattitude day in a row. I did not expect to have a show today, but I was texting with Zach last night, and I just felt like after that game, I didn't think how we could not go without a show and put some clips together. And so let's do our predictions. And look, I tell it like it is here. If it is what it is. So let's start with Zach, as I've kind of foreshadowed what I'm going to say.
Well, you nailed the championship series. You had LSU versus Florida, and so I don't assume you're going to change who you think is going to win it. But I'll go the other way. I mean, I think LSU is going to win this series, and maybe you mentioned recency bias. Is that recency bias after watching what happened last night? I just see a team that has flat out said we're not going home without that trophy. And, Florida has won 3 one-run games as well. They've shown a propensity for winning the close games. But I look at Florida and I go, Virginia could have, should have had them in the first game. They jumped out on Oral Roberts in the second game, but let them back in the game, didn't really step on their throat. And then the third game, they get an infield hit to take the lead on TCU in the top of the ninth, and then get a great catch at the wall in the bottom of the ninth to win it. I just don't. And again, performance in Omaha is certainly not all we're talking about. This has been a good team all year long. Interesting, too, that these teams, both in the SEC, have not played this year. They didn't play in the regular season, didn't play in the SEC tournament. So we're going in a little bit blind. If everything was lined up perfectly, LSU would be a pretty sizable favorite. Of course, they don't have Skenes for at least the first 2 games. Probably Thatcher Hurd maybe can't pitch tomorrow because he's throwing significant pitches 2 days in a row, so he may be out until Sunday. So you kind of have some obstacles for LSU on the pitching side, and so that gives me a little bit of pause. But I see a killer instinct with this team, and I think they're the more talented team. And if it does get to game 3, as we've said, you're going to have the Skenes factor, and I think LSU takes it down.
I 100% agree about the killer instinct. The problem is I've seen that same killer instinct on the other side from what I've seen. And I know a lot of, again, casual fans probably haven't watched Florida games that much. They've been on in the afternoon for the most part. You probably haven't seen Florida, and I get that, but I think they have the same killer instinct. I think they're just as good as LSU. And as you said, Zach, going into the regional round, as soon as the SEC tournament was over, I said Florida and LSU were the 2 best teams in the country. I still believe that. I believed it yesterday, and I said it yesterday going into, I thought LSU was better than Wake Forest, but I didn't know if it was enough for them to win the game after all that they had to come out of the losers bracket. I don't think people can appreciate how incredibly tough that is. I mean, it's not just the one less game, but when you're talking about one more game in a short period of time and lining up your pitching, and it worked out that if you could win on Wednesday, you could get to Skenes, but then you have to overcome the emotion of winning that game to force another game. It's just so incredibly tough. Even with Skenes, I was worried that they were going to come out and, just kind of, okay, we got Skenes, we don't have to worry about anything. So I guess the long-winded answer is I think Florida is really good. Having that extra day off makes a huge amount of difference. I mean, a huge amount of difference. Florida has everything lined up for them. I thought they were even teams anyway. I picked Florida to win this thing before this this thing started, and I can't get away from it. I hope I'm wrong. I'm an LSU guy. Again, I was born with purple and gold in my blood. Been watching and listening to LSU. You know, before all the games were on TV, I used to sit there on Saturday nights as a kid, you know, listening to radio. And so, you know, I listening to Ferguson make the calls. But I just don't. I think Florida's the better team. I'm surprised that, you know, we talked about odds before. I think it's -120 Florida, like you said, +100 LSU now. I'm surprised it's not more than that, honestly. I think Florida's a great value if you have the stomach to bet against LSU. And I bet Florida along when they were 10-1. So I got Florida in the bank. I'm probably going to hedge a little bit with LSU, but I think Florida's a great value.
I disagree with the value. I think that if these two teams had their pitching lined up and we're just playing a series in the middle of April at a neutral site, that LSU would be a -150, -160 favorite. And so I think all that's baked in. And by the way, Florida has played 2 fewer games, not 1. They've only played 3. LSU's played 5.
That's right.
So it is a significant difference in pitching, but I think that's baked into the odds. It's pretty close to a coin flip, and I don't think it's crazy to think Florida could win. I think there is probably a little bit of an emotional letdown from LSU. I can't decide. Obviously, from a pitching perspective, having a day off is a good thing for LSU. I can't decide if, from a momentum perspective, if it's good to have that day to just take a breath and be like, okay, now let's go play, or if you just want to keep rolling.
Oh, no, they need a day off.
But yeah, a day off's good. They're over at the park right now doing a press conference and pictures with the coaches and the trophies and all that. And then they'll be back at it tomorrow. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I assume Ty Floyd will start for LSU tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
5 days rest. Game 2, a little more of a question. I mean, if it were me, I'd bring back Nate Ackenhausen.
But you might see Nate Ackenhausen pitch tomorrow, I think.
But that's if you see Nate Ackenhausen pitch tomorrow, then maybe Sunday is a bullpen day where you get a couple innings out of Griffin Herring, who pitched well, a couple innings out of Riley Cooper, Gavin Guidry, Thatcher Hurd, and you just piece it together. But my guess is that tomorrow is going to be Floyd, Guidry, and Cooper, and they hope that's enough so that they can start Ackenhausen again on Sunday.
I think Ackenhausen doesn't pitch if Floyd can get past the 6th, which I doubt, by the way. I think if Floyd gets past the 6th, then Ackenhausen is saved for game 2. Otherwise, look, you can't – this point of the year, I think everything's up in the air. You know how Jay Johnson talked about how he wrote on a whiteboard, you know, after they lost the Monday game, he had everything on a board planned out. I don't think you can plan this series out. I just don't. I think you can have an idea of what you want to do, but I don't think you can go in saying – I think the only known right now is that Floyd goes out and pitches game 1. Skenes is going to pitch game 3 if there is one, and everything else just kind of happens. And so, I mean, I think that's where we are. I think there's an excellent chance that this series goes game 3. That being said, LSU has to win game 1, I think. I don't think you can lose game 1 and have a bullpen game against this team and find a way to come back and win 2 in a row. I just don't, because Skenes is not going to pitch 8 innings like he did. If he pitches in game 3, I mean, I think we all think he's going to pitch some kind of way if there is a game 3. There's no way he's going 8 innings. He's just not. So you've got to, in my opinion, if LSU doesn't win game 1, I think they're toast.
I disagree with you in that I don't think it's over if they lose game 1. But I do think that if I'm LSU, if I'm Jay Johnson, I'm going all out to win game 1. I'm sparing no pitcher I think I need.
Agreed.
You know, I'm doing whatever it takes to try to win Saturday, because if you can pull that off, then Sunday, you know, you're playing with house money a little bit, where you know you've got Skenes coming back Monday.
Agreed.
You don't have to pull out all the stops on Sunday. Maybe you say, okay, we're down 4-3 in the 7th. Normally I'd throw Cooper here to keep it close, but you know, maybe I save him because I know I'm going to need him for a couple innings Monday, and you can afford to do that, obviously, if you have a lead in the series. So I do think you're going to see him go all out to win tomorrow night's game, but I don't think it's over if they don't.
We'll find out. Well, we hope we don't find out, I guess. I think most people watching this are probably LSU fans. So, and again, went to LSU in purple and gold in my veins. I hope I'm wrong. But again, I think they need to win game 1. We'll find out. All right, I want to thank everyone for watching out there. It's been a lot of fun. Zach, I know you got a lot going on from just on the other side of the river from Omaha. He's actually in Iowa. I feel like saying I'm in Iowa. I mean, it's Iowa.
Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah, is Iowa heaven?
And shout out to the folks at Harris Council Bluffs. That phone call you heard in the background, actually, I think I have a package here from the Advocate that may or may not come in handy. So I'm going to go downstairs and get that, and we'll keep rolling.
I have the same package. I think that we're creating for the USFL.
Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe.
Mum's the word.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to make a little USFL joke there. I set you up, but you didn't take it.
You know what? We just had a call with Caesars, and I mentioned the USFL. You would have been proud of me.
Oh, wow. Okay, impressive. And by the way, New Orleans Breakers in the South Division Championship on Sunday. They are not playing at the so you can have a great afternoon. You can watch LSU at 2:00, and then I think the Breakers play in the South Division Championship against their nemesis, the Birmingham. God, I'm having a brain cramp. Stallions. I had a brain cramp.
How did I know that and you didn't?
I do know it. I'm getting old, man. I have just intermediate brain cramps at different points in my life. It just crops up out of nowhere. That's how I know I'm getting old.
Maybe LSU will win the title on Sunday, and I'll go have a couple Jello shots at Rocco's and ask him to put the USFL game on.
All right, there you go. I'll be playing poker, most likely. Anyway, when we're done here, and we are done, Zach, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Jim.
I wanted to say that I'm going to go add my monologue, add my thoughts. I think I pretty much gave most of my thoughts, but there are a few other little things that I will say in my monologue. We'll have our outro song of the day, and we will be back. I think we're going to have one more show before this show goes on a little mini break as I go into vacation world and enjoy after Wednesday, I think. So come back next week. We should have one more show. We're hoping to get Paul Maneri. If we don't, hopefully maybe we'll have Cade Beloso or someone else from LSU next week. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the College World Series Championship round. Peace and love, my friends.